Welcome back to the Stepping Bricks YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Giuseppe Paladini. I'm the founder of Stepping Bricks, and today I have a wonderful guest who is an expert in compliance for property sourcing, property deal packaging, etc. So we are going to introduce Tina Walsh. Hello, Tina. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the invite. It's great to be here.
So first of all, Tina, I have to admit that I'm guilty of this. So probably, I would say, surely is one of the most popular books in the property industry. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the questions that the audience asked, but specifically for beginners, they want to get into property because property sourcing, deal packaging is one of those strategies that doesn't require much money. So for people that don't have a lot of investment funds, then probably that is one of the strategies to start with. And even if they later on they have a lot of money, then they integrate this strategy with other property strategies. So let's make a distinction between deal sourcing and deal packaging, first of all.
Before we do that, let's mention the book. It's no longer up for sale on Amazon directly from us because it's out of date. So if you're buying from Amazon, you're buying them secondhand and you're reading out of date material. So please don't buy the book anymore. As much as I loved writing it, I can't keep it up to date fast enough to maintain it at the appropriate level. You asked the question about the difference between deal packaging and deal sourcing. To me, the only difference, if you want to create a difference, is the way that the business operates. So deal sources are taken as where they are actually sourcing a bespoke product for an investor, whereas deal packaging is where they're finding a deal and then trying to find the investor to buy it. And that's intrinsically, as far as I can make out, the only difference between the two. Is there a difference in compliance? No, it's exactly the same for both.
In terms of compliance, of course, they need to be, up to date with the regulations, etc. With the change of legislation, more or less, how long does it take for one person from the moment they start to become compliant?
That depends on their baseline knowledge to start off with. If you know nothing about sourcing or the 15, 16 pieces of regulation that govern us, you've got a lot of studying to do. So before you start, you need to understand what you're getting into. And sourcing isn't for everyone because it isn't as easy as a lot of people try to make it out. It isn't cash in the bank as quickly as a lot of people try to make it out. And there is a lot of regulation behind it. And now, much more policing of the sector by the supervisory bodies. So time scale, time, how long is a piece of string? How much time have you got? How easy do you find studying? How easy do you find creating policies, risk assessments, and procedures? Cost, your insurance and your required registrations are in the region of about £1,000. That doesn't include any training or any documents or any knowledge.
That's good. Thank you. We've seen a lot of people that are co-sourcing, on social media. So possibly they're not compliant and they're looking for somebody that is compliant, and then they co-source together. How is that seen by HMRC?
Illegal. In the last 3 months, we've seen 3 fines issued to sourcing agents who were told they could co-source. 2 at £1,500, 1 at £1,700. And that was because they hadn't traded. If they had traded, I've seen a fine as high as £6,300 for a sourcing agent.
And you can see very, very frequently this because they think it's so easy just to find the property, give it to somebody else that is already compliant, and then they split the fee. However, this, as you mentioned before, is not the right way to do it and can be quite painful in terms of finance.
And one of the major issues that they don't realise is that 90% plus of sourcing agents operating in the UK operate illegal anyway. So even if they could legally link with another sourcing agent, the chances are that they haven't found one that is compliant because insurance, redress, ICO and HMRC registrations are not compliance. That is the tip of the iceberg. And sadly, when someone declares on Facebook, I'm fully compliant, they mean they've got insurance and these registrations. But what they don't understand is that they've registered for supervision.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's those aspects of supervision that they don't understand. So no, you can't co-source without full compliance in place. The only way that you could get away with it is if you class yourself as an introducer.
Mhm.
And to be an introducer, you have not to carry out any work that will be considered to be estate agency work, which includes viewing properties, asking or considering or negotiating about sale price, packaging up, creating a presentation, and lots of other things that are now in the list from NSALAC, which is National Trading Standards Estates and Lettings Agents team. So they've adapted what they consider to be estate agency work and given more detail on it. So if you have a website and you're advertising for people to come to you that want to sell the properties, if you're viewing properties, you're having discussions with the seller about what price would be acceptable, if you're packaging it up and creating a presentation, you are carrying out estate agency work and you must have full compliance in place. The only way that you will be considered to be an introducer is if someone gets in touch with you and says, I'd like to sell my property. You say, I may know someone who will be able to help. Can I have an email address, a telephone number, and your name, possibly the address of the property? Pass it on to the sourcer, and they give you an introduction fee for it. But let's be honest, unless you're doing a lot of work, why would they share 50% of their sourcing fee with you just for a name, address, and a telephone number?
Yeah, that's right. We have an estate agency, estate and letting agency, Golden Tree Estates, and we had to do all the compliance, of course, to do everything legally. And we see a lot of deal sources around the areas as well. They say, oh, we can pass you the deals, or if you have any deals, pass it to us, and so on. Some of them actually I've seen on social media, they actually offer, between £100 and £500 to anybody who can introduce them, and we use the word introduce them to deal sources, and then the deal source will sell it for 3, 5, 10,000 pounds, whatever it is, their fee. However, it's kind of a gray area there because they do negotiate, before passing it on. So they
If they
do.
negotiate, they have to have full compliance. There's no grey area about it at all. They have to have full compliance. They're acting as an agent.
That's right. That's right. Right, that's very interesting. So thank you for that clarification. This is important. And when they say we're talking about compliance, when they say I'm fully compliant, they put the 2 or 3 things, 2 or 3 codes on their socials. What does that mean? They can actually carry out estate agency work, or they're compliant just for deal sourcing? Because I think it's not a clear distinction there for them. They don't understand that he's actually doing a proper estate agency work instead of just deal sourcing.
They are carrying out estate agency work, which is governed under every piece of regulation and legislation that covers high street estate agents. They don't realise it because some of them are not taught to realise it, and some of them don't want to realise it because it means then they have to accept that they have to have an awful lot of compliance in place. So there's sort of like different groups of different people. There are those that don't know and haven't researched it and honestly don't know and would want to be fully compliant if they knew. And those that kind of know but want to put it aside because that means that all that compliance stuff comes into place. We are considered to be carrying out estate agency work. A lot of people get confused because they say, I'm not an estate agent. The legislation isn't about estate agents, it's about estate agency work.
Yeah.
And you have to register with either or of the redress schemes, ICO and HMRC. When you register with HMRC, you register as an estate agent because there's no other option. And I know from working with them, that is unlikely to change. But now with both redress schemes, you can tick the box and say that you're a sourcing agent because they are working with the National Association and we're working with them to improve their understanding of the sector and how we operate and guide them. And so now there's a tick box for you to say, I'm a sourcing agent, and both redress schemes work with us and check that you are actually a member.
Okay. So now let's assume somebody is fully compliant, for carrying out estate agency work. Then they decide not to open a estate agent, but to actually do deal sourcing and sell it to investors. What next?
The easiest way and the safest way for them to operate on compliance is to get an investor to work with. we talked at the very beginning about the difference between deal sourcing and deal packaging. Most of the courses in the UK at the moment, and not that I've attended any, I haven't, and I can't comment on the content, I believe teach the deal package, which is go out and find a deal and then find an investor to purchase it. But you will understand from operating an estate agency business that there are rules around ID verification and client due diligence and timing of it. And from your perspective as a high street estate agent, your contracted client is the seller because they pay you a fee. And so you do your ID verification and client due diligence on them prior to marketing that property to potential buyers. When a buyer comes and an offer is accepted, at that point, then you decide their risk rating and you carry out ID verification and client due diligence on the buyer at the point when an offer is accepted. But that is only for high street estate agents, because a sourcing agent, a deal packager, whatever you want to call them, in the main are paid by the buyer. So it flips how you operate in your estate agency business on its head. And we have to carry out ID verification and client due diligence no later than when a business agreement or an agreement to work together has been entered into. And that doesn't have to be a written contract, it can be a verbal agreement. So if you're going to find a deal, but you don't know who's going to buy it, and then you put it out on social media and someone that you've never met before comes and says, I want that deal, you can't pass it on to the solicitors, or you're immediately in breach of money laundering regulations. You've got to stop the whole process and carry out ID verification and client due diligence.
Yeah.
Which then, if you promise the seller you can get them a fast cash sale, all of a sudden that isn't the case. So the easiest way to stay certainly in line with anti-money laundering regulations is to have your buyer on board. KYC, which is a term regularly used in the guidance from HMRC around money laundering, which is know your customer, know your client. Carry out ID verification, client due diligence, risk assess them, onboard them, know exactly what they want, go out and find it.
Yeah, that happens already in the industry of estate agency. However, not every estate agent asks for ID checks when they do, for example, if I'm buying properties for investments, then I can buy from 10 different estate agents. On 2 will ask me for proof of funds and ID checks, for anti-money laundering. So how that...
Dependent on how their risk assessments are set. HMRC say that you can have, if you wish, 3 categories: simplified, standard, and enhanced. Now, if you think about it from a high street estate agency point, predominantly they sell properties to people who are going to buy them and live in them. So the risk of money laundering is fairly low. From a sourcer perspective or a high street estate agent, if they're selling to an investor, the risk is higher. But not all high street estate agents know the regulations well enough to understand that and adapt their risk assessments to cover the difference between someone who's going to buy and live in it and someone who's going to buy it as an investment, and adjust the risk assessment accordingly. And a recent report indicated that at least 66% of high street estate agents breach money laundering regulations on a daily basis. I can tell you that figure in the sourcing sector is probably 95% plus.
Yeah. I have a question regards to the vendors. For example, if you are the vendor, why would you go to a deal sourcer rather than an actual estate agent?
Vendors are different creatures when they want to sell their property. They will probably already have consulted an estate agent and got maybe 3 variations on prices that they believe the value of the property is. And then they may test a sourcing agent to see what kind of service it is. A lot of vendors like the idea of a sourcing agent, one, because sourcing agents don't charge the vendor a fee usually. 2, they don't have to handle a myriad of viewings and keep the house clean and tidy and etc. You know the score when you're doing viewings. And so having a sourcing agent that has a buyer there that is interested in that property because they've already carried out a level of due diligence on the property and it fits the investor's criteria can be quite appealing to them. If they can get a quick deal over the line without estate agency fees, sometimes the buyer will pay the solicitor's fees or contribute towards it, and the process is smooth.
All right. Question about marketing now. How would a deal sourcer market compared to normal estate agency?
Estate agents, your contracted clients as your sellers. So you've ID verified and client due diligence and prove that they have the legal right to sell. You check their ID before you even market the property because those are the rules. Sourcing agents tend to find a deal and then just punt it out into Facebook groups. So apart from the fact that they're potentially in breach of money laundering regulations, they don't know who's going to buy it. And if they're not direct to the seller, if they've gone to an agent and told porky pies about who's going to buy it, they're not being particularly professional. So what I would say is have the investor on board so that you don't have to advertise it on open forums, and you match their criteria as closely as you possibly can do, and then you have a buyer on board. Once you've got the first sale over the line, you know exactly how to hit the nail on the head. It's much easier to sell multiple products to one person than it is to keep selling one product to multiple people.
And in terms of leads, how do what was your experience in finding leads?
We always make it very, very clear to our investors when we're bringing them on board to our sourcing agency that we will use any means that are legal open to us to be able to find leads. That can be Rightmove or Zoopla or local estate agents or lettings agents or other sourcing agents direct to vendor. Once you know exactly what it is that you're looking for, you're not hunting for that needle in a haystack. You're not drowning 50 streets with
letters.
What do they call it? Postcards or whatever it is that they send out these days. And trust me, I've done that. We've done that. But if you know exactly what it is that you're looking for, you can direct letter certain properties on certain streets and more niche down your market and save on costs and time. So leads, that's how we do it. Word of mouth is always great. Working with landlords who have large portfolios is always a great source of, if they're downsizing, they want to get rid of some properties, or they could be changing from buy-to-lets to HMOs and switching their portfolio needs around. There could be all sorts of reasons for it. So finding landlords with large portfolios who either want to increase or decrease, but understanding exactly what your investor wants, knowing your area that you're working on which parts of those areas down to which streets and which properties in those streets match that criteria, and having a series of about 7 letters that you take and you drop off and you follow up with another letter in 7 to 10 days, so on and so forth. That's how we do it. Plus estate agents and lettings agents.
Yeah, I agree with that. Last question, Tina. For a beginner, complete beginner, they want to start in property, they want, whatever reason, maybe they want to leave the 9-to-5 job, or they attended a course or something, they realize that deal sourcing could be one of those strategies to get away with these 9-to-5 jobs. So what would you advise to them?
Don't hand in your notice just yet. Except that a lot of people say, I want a job that replaces my salary. Well, sourcing, as you will know from a estate agency, is not necessarily a regular income. It's what I call chunky cash. So you may sell 3 deals in 1 month and then nothing for another 3 months. And you've got costs of running your business. So accept that it's going to be chunky cash. You're not going to replace your £70,000 salary immediately. Allow yourself 12 months to set up your business, onboard an investor, know what you're doing, have all of your documentation, your legalities in place, and get a deal over the line. If you can do it faster than 12 months, then fantastic. But don't put yourself under that pressure financially that you have to do it. And understand exactly what is involved in sourcing. And I don't mean, courses where they teach you how to find investors or sellers. Understand the legal process that sits underneath it, and decide if that is actually for you or not. And let's face it, understanding regulation and legislation isn't for everyone. So get to understand exactly what's required and make a decision for yourself as to whether that is for you or not. There are other strategies that you can do with small pots of cash other than just sourcing, such as assisted sales potentially, or doing some sort of a JV where you have knowledge and you can exchange that knowledge in exchange for someone investing in your product.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much. So Thank you once again for coming to this Stepping Bricks episode. Thank you very much. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.